This is Cold Star, Tales from the Spine, where the Milky Way meets Andromeda. One voice, one ship. One very bad idea involving crypto. Hold on to your coffee and your wallets. My name is Ned Valen. I have outrun corporate gunships, survived on roasted gleamworms, and negotiated with pirates using nothing but a wrench and Enric's questionable hat collection. None of that was as dangerous as the week I let myself get talked into investing in crypto. It started, like most bad decisions, with a slogan on a station screen. We were at New Singapore Waypoint, trying to sell honest cargo to people who preferred dishonest margins. The concourse filled with holo ads for something called Spine Chain. The pitch promised a new era of borderless, bankless, frictionless value across the spine, decorated with spinning coins that looked suspiciously like Prometheus logos that had been tipped sideways and given sunglasses. It was the visual equivalent of someone whispering that gravity had been optional this entire time. On the ship, the reactions were predictable. Enric's eyes lit up with a particular shine. That means he has detected a new way to sell air. Mika's eyebrows performed an emergency skepticism drill. Tor quietly opened a ledger and began adding hypothetical columns. Lies located the terms and conditions with the reflexes of a seasoned medic reaching for bandages. Betsy, plugged into a corner port, emitted a diagnostic beep that sounded almost like disapproval. Spine Chain had a booth in the concourse. The booth contained everything that usually precedes regret: glossy displays, free mugs, soft seating, and a representative whose teeth had clearly been project managed. The representative introduced a vision for the future in which everything could be tokenized: cargo slots, jump routes, even narratives. According to the presentation, Cold Star could become an on-chain narrative asset, with each story minted as a unique story coin. Fans, investors, and opportunists could trade them. The crew would maintain full decentralized ownership. There were promises of governance tokens, sign-up bonuses, referral multipliers, zero-gravity consensus algorithms, and something called proof of story. The explanation for that last one relied heavily on marketing adjectives and lightly on physics. By the time we left the booth, we had a new wallet app installed on the Argus console, a founder NFT of Betsy blinking above a pile of magnetite, and a commemorative mug claiming that we had gotten early on Spine Chain. Betsy's NFT was disturbingly charming. It featured her LID blinking in a loop with sparkles. It said something uncomfortable about the universe, that a maintenance drone's avatar was more compelling than most bank logos I had seen. The token factory accelerated from cautious curiosity to full comedy in under a day. With a few guided taps and too much optimism, we managed to mint Ned Coin, allegedly a governance and narrative token, Betsy token, backed, according to Mika, by error logs and saved lives, hat stake, Enric's subscription model with a white paper made mostly of pictures of hats, Favor, Tor's attempt to put his favor economy on chain, and Coffee Swap, my half-serious idea for a beverage-backed stablecoin, lacking the minor detail of actual coffee. The market responded in the only way it knows how, irrationally and on a schedule no one asked for. The first clear signal that matters were off the rails arrived when Betsy token became more valuable than NED coin. Apparently, people in the broader spine trusted a small, overachieving drone more than a weathered captain. To be fair, the market and I were in agreement on that point. Betsy had a flawless record. I had a collection of near misses and long logs. A secondary channel on some trader hub began speculating on Betsy's upside. Anonymous users with names that sounded like in jokes and malware handles formed a group to pump the patchling. One subsection veered off into detailed discussions about the optimal brand of oil for long-term chassis health. It was difficult to decide whether to be concerned or impressed. Meanwhile, tokenization did what it always does, turned simple human mess into complex numerical chaos. Tor's Favor token, designed to represent his network of personal IOUs, spun out of his control almost immediately. One of his long-standing favors, a promise to help Giulia in New Lisbon with a future problem, was bought, staked, and traded 3 times before lunch. By the end of the day, the ledger declared that Tor now owed a favor not to Giulia, but to a sequence of anonymous addresses collectively known only as the pool. As problems go, owing favors to a liquidity pool sits somewhere between comedic and existential. NED Coin itself had a brief moment of glory. Some anonymous account clipped a line from one of my old logs about improvising and hoping not to die, turned it into an audio loop, and attached it to a meme. For a few hours, my weary face, frozen mid-sip from the flask, became a symbol of relatable Captain Energy. The tokens chart shot up as people traded on the novelty of it all. 6 hours later, the novelty decayed under the gravitational pull of basic due diligence. We had no actual product beyond surviving our own choices. The price graph did what price graphs do when they encounter reality. It turned downward and tried not to make eye contact. There were also the hats. HAT stake began as a joke and quickly evolved into a multi-layered cautionary parable. The idea was to allow buyers of NRIX hats to earn yield by staking their ownership rights on chain. In practice, this meant that whenever someone bought a hat and then decided to resell it, they entered a hall of mirrors comprised of references to previous owners, loyalty points, and a coupon for 1 free reshaping of the brim. The token diverged from reality so quickly that at one point, there were more claims on hats than hats in existence. Even Enric, who loves leverage the way some people love ballads, had to admit that perhaps the system had become something beyond his control. The Corpi inevitably noticed. It turns out that when you attach your own name to something that fluctuates wildly in perceived value, regulatory antennae vibrate. A polite note from an audit subunit arrived, framed in courteous concern. Were we, perhaps, offering unregistered narrative securities? There were implications that we might have accidentally formed something resembling a cult. The main evidence cited was the existence of NED Coin and the volume of memes featuring my face in combination with motivational slogans I had never personally uttered. At roughly the same moment, Prometheus entered the scene with its own token, PRMTH, backed by corporate treasuries, marketing, and a strong appetite for absorbing competitors. Their liquidity pool dwarfed the microcosm around our experimental tokens. They announced a community buyout program for small narrative tokens. On paper, it looked supportive. In practice, it was a quiet vacuum cleaner. The crew consensus formed quickly on the most important point. The drone's dignity had to be protected. Betsy token, improbable as it was, felt less like a joke and more like a story that belonged to her record of unasked for heroism. The rest, the hats, the favors, my unfortunate governance coin, were negotiable. Betsy, by virtue of her unambiguous usefulness, had a legitimate claim to being left alone. Unwinding the mess became our real work. The exit strategy looked like a mixture of confession, damage control, and stand-up comedy. We turned NED Coin into a non-asset by announcing that its only remaining feature was redeemability for a signed apology log. We bought back what we could at a flat, modest rate and locked the remainder into a wallet labeled, with full accuracy, Bad Idea Museum. HAT stake was collapsed into a series of in-person apologies, and free hat adjustments. Favre was retired with a long explanation about why some obligations should never be traded like cargo. Coffee Swap quietly disappeared into the folder of projects considered while sleep-deprived. Betsy Token remained as a pure collectible with no roadmap, no promises, and no governance, only the story that she was, in fact, Betsy. The market, strangely enough, liked that. It seemed comforted by an asset that had no ambition beyond existing as a symbol of a small robot's good work. The regulators, perhaps out of mercy or shared amusement, classified us as enthusiastic experimenters rather than malicious actors. We paid a fine small enough to be embarrassing rather than ruinous. A recording of our debrief, in which I explained with weary sincerity that our long-term vision consisted chiefly of not dying and fixing broken things, circulated in niche circles as a warning tale. It sat next to cautionary presentations titled things like, "Do not tokenize everything you see." On the ship, life settled back into orbit around more tangible concerns: fuel mixture tolerances, hull repairs, local politics, and the ongoing hunt for proper coffee. Betsy's NFT retired into a folder labeled Artifacts, where we keep mementos that hurt just enough to be instructive. Every so often, someone sends a message asking whether NED Coin will relaunch. The answer remains a simple no, accompanied by directions toward more sensible ventures like buying reliable parts. In the mess, we distilled the experience into a single shared understanding. The crew works best when stories remain stories and not speculative instruments. It is one thing to enjoy that someone in another system has drawn caricatures of our misadventures. It is another to see those misadventures plotted as jagged lines on a volatility chart. In a final log entry on the matter, I noted that we had learned the difference between value and price in a way that only a round of ridiculous experimentation can teach. The price of a coin with my face on it could rise and fall arbitrarily. The value of Betsy hauling herself under a hostile cutter to save our lives, or of Mika coaxing an old engine through another jump, or of Tor quietly renegotiating someone's debt to keep them flying. Those were not things that benefited from being placed in a market. In the end, we did what we always do. We laughed at ourselves, closed the apps, shut down the dashboards, and went back to work. The Argus was still held together by bolts and optimism, not blockchains. The next contract would be paid in credits and gratitude, not tokens. Betsy, unsurprisingly, was happiest of all. She only ever wanted oil, a ribbon, and a system that did not ask her to appreciate price charts.